Welcome back to Lineout Lab. Thank you for joining me. I did a workshop during the week on red zone, both attack and defense, which I think is going to be very interesting this year, given the new law focus, refocus, amendments, whatever way you want to shape it. And I think, I think it's going to be a really interesting area of the game. I think that the red zone, in particular, on itself, is just become a massive. I suppose, a whole different part of the game, and it's becoming really intricate and detailed. And I think teams that can attack and defend well are going to do well in their respective leagues. So, as I say, these are a few clips that I put together for discussion, analysis, thoughts. And then we actually did a Q&A afterwards, but that bit's not in this part of the video. However, you're interested in hearing more, I will be doing a similar workshop in the next couple of weeks. So feel free to drop me a line, let me know what you think of the clips, and let me know what you think of the red zone. In case if you haven't seen it, I'm sure probably a number of you have seen it, but in case you haven't seen it, I'll just kind of highlight some of those points. So I suppose firstly, as you know, sorry, I'm also going to look at it, both sides of the ball. Probably would veer more towards on the attack side, but we're looking at both sides within the red zone. And it's funny. I think I was talking to a coach there last week, and they've had a very successful season in recent times and in their last season, and he was just saying that they put a lot of it down to actually spending a lot more dedicated time together in the red zone. And this coach was telling me this was about another coach in the pro game they've had a great season, and they've scored a lot of tries in the red zone, and they attributed it to the fact that they've put together more time together as a team, so both attack and defense. And I think that's kind of interesting. It's kind of only reconfirmed my feeling on the red zone. I think the red zone is almost like a separate sport now at this stage. It's kind of leaning into my idea of wanting to have a line-out Olympics, or like a line-out Olympics where it's just you get 10 line-outs each, and it's team small over. You just go at it, and knockout competition in like a little volleyball arena type thing. Obviously not sand and grass, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. But anyway, let's look at one clip here. In recent times, and just to kind of get us into it, I'll just make this a little bit brighter. But we can see it's actually a good image in many ways, just to kind of give us a bit of a point. If France don't get on the scoreboard, but I suppose ultimately what this clip kind of shows me a few things is that if you overcommit on the Maul, you're going to get exposed elsewhere. And I think it's actually very good defending by Black 4 here. Because he's in a position there where he's not really driving forward. He's not driving up and down the pitch, if that makes sense. He's kind of on a side angle, but he's not giving a huge amount. And he's very careful not to drive in too much from the side, because if he does, that's going to swing the French Maul around to the open side, and they'll get around the corner. So he has to be very, very careful of not overcommitting his weight. And then what he actually does as he sits off, so it is potentially an opportunity to regenerate very quickly and hard back into this space, again being mindful of not overcommitting your weight. So that's something which I think he does actually quite well. And instead of actually hitting, because the Kiwis get they get a decent drive on him, he actually ends up being a pretty useful defender. Otherwise it was a 3v2. So I think they would have beaten the negative defender coming Will Jordan coming from the open side. So he ends up being quite good defense. But there's a lot now at play to think about defensively. And here we have, from a defensive perspective, we have two forwards, a back swinging from the negative, and then another back covering. So, I think it'd be fair. I think we as coaches now need to really start thinking about working more together as a team and as a collective, I should say, with regards to the red zone. Because if Black 4 hits, then they're in a world of pain. And if France look like they're getting around the corner, he will have to hit anyway. So I think you can't cover everything, and the Maul is probably the first thing that you have to really protect and defend from a defensive aspect, and that's probably going to feed into attacking teams as well, and not having that understanding. So I thought that was quite an interesting one, just to kind of set the scene. And of course, you could have a decent Maul, but it doesn't necessarily, a Maul defense, excuse me, a decent Maul defense, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to stop the try. And here we actually see a pretty decent effort, I think, by France. But ultimately, if you have to work so bloody hard to defend, you're going to get caught somewhere. And I think that's a really good play from Cal Roygaard. And France. Just if we look at the Maul aspect, okay, so we're looking at 6+1, 6+1 from the attack, six wides here. How they hit, I think this is something when it comes to the Maul, but how we hit is going to be interesting. Here, what I find very interesting is that they hit as almost like a flat line of six, the whites do, and in some ways, some teams will hit with four and one in behind, or four and two in behind. You don't see that much. That's actually a thought that I guess I'll come back to that at the end about where that might actually have a place again. But they've gone for six. Now, the other thing fairly important note to bear in mind is that they're pretty big fellas. You mightn't have as much size to play with. So basically, because they hit, it's really difficult for New Zealand to get around them. And even at that, what's really good, if you look at white three, he does a really good job to feel that he's not being of use, and he regenerates. And then the hooker, white scrum cap, he was a channel defender, and he actually hits as well. So they actually have all eight tied in here now. Now we can look at the blindside pressure that puts on. You see our nine here. He now has to be more mindful of the blind side. So it's putting strain and pressure, I think, across all, not just the Maul. And I think that's where it's probably, as I said, I know I've said it twice already, but I think that's ultimately where we really need to look at the RedZone as a team, from a team perspective, and the knock-on effect. So if you do commit eight to defend the Maul, well then what's the implications of that? And ultimately it leads to a breakaway, and you see all these French defenders here are tied up in that Maul. The first defender is white eight. In fairness, he's probably right to go for the ball to slow it down. We could argue about 12's entry in terms of the ruck, but he's kind of positive. Anyway, ultimately leads in a try. So I think that's obviously the dangers of that red zone. Okay, so if you do commit heavily, you're going to be weak and exposed elsewhere. So let's look at a couple of clips. Okay, so what I think, there's a couple of things that I think are going to be important. I think it's going to encourage more teams to be more aggressive in the air, and I think teams are generally more aggressive in the air in the last 3 years. So I think that's only going to increase in terms of getting up. Um, I think you might see other tactics like trying to really disintegrate them all rather than going for the traditional nets and spears or whatever terminology you use. But like, we have a flat wall, a flat line of four, and you've got two heads in the seams and two heads on the outside so they don't get around the corner easily. And then you've got guys ready either side or girls ready either side to potentially hit if they do roll around the corner. Um, but one thing I do think is whether you up or whether you go down, I think how you regenerate is going to be really important. So if you're needed to, redistribute your weight and look and feel for them all, I do think that's going to be important. I think we kind of get an example over here of how quickly guys have to regenerate and look to be effective. And I think that's a pretty good defensive example of that. I don't think it was as sharp from Ireland. And the other thing as well, if we look at the timing of the hit, I think that's where we'll really see um, teams push the boundary as well, or push the limits, push the law. Is that if you look at when the front lifter green four gets hit, that like you can just see the feet of the jumper. The purple boot is wearing lovely lavender boots, so we can get a good look at them. But they haven't hit the deck yet. Now they're on the ground, and that front wall has already been hit. And I think that's where you will now see teams. Well, I think, look, I don't think that's any different. I think teams have been doing that anyway. But I think it'll become a more of a focus point in terms of really trying to get that timing of the hit. And I think if you can do that, then that will free you up just to unsettle the transfer, unsettle the front wall, unsettle the transfer, the rip from the +1, and unsettle the punch. And I think if you can win those first couple of seconds, I think that's going to be imperative to your Maul defense. I hope you're enjoying the video thus far. There's loads of great clips coming up. And sorry to be too salesy here, but if you are interested in learning more about what I do, I have a Patreon subscription, which is, I think, is quite a useful tool for anyone who wants to develop their, I suppose, their knowledge around the lineout. Even if you're experienced already, I think there's some loads of really good discussion videos and analysis videos in there. It's a little bit different to other videos, but other content that's out there. Or whether it's stuff that on teams that I'm working on. I think that's quite interesting. And then I also work with coaches 1-to-1, which is my lineout buddy. And then I have a lot of self-paced courses. So I've lineout throwing, I have the Maul, I've lineout defense. I used to have learned to throw, but I got rid of that. But I have recently launched a lineout calling one, which I think is really good in terms of for callers, but also for coaches. And then building lineout menus. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions on any of that. Let's get back into it. And attacks obviously need to be mindful of that too. So let's have another look. Similar option. And I think the mindset, I think a beneficial mindset will be one of chaos, really. Trying to disintegrate that Maul as quickly as possible, as much as possible. So let's look at the timing here. Just as the jumper comes down. Now, Ireland don't do a great job here of actually protecting that near slot. Now, unless they were trying to, I'll just pause it here, unless, we'll go another frame, unless, if you look at green 1, like the fact that he goes to there, the fact that he goes to this position, it looks like he hesitates in some shape or form. It looks like he's hesitated. Was he meant to go on the left of the ripper, or was he meant to add weight on the far side? Either way, the timing is just a little bit off. So I think if the Maul attack timing is a little bit off, well, then I think that's definitely going to put, you're definitely going to be, from a defensive perspective, be, able to put them under pressure. And I think as well, if you look at red scrum cap here, they just get through that seam, that front seam. So green 5 is the front lifter. You've got 2 guys who split that seam and even grab the leg. And I think even things like that, like grabbing a leg, I think obviously you're not meant to, but just getting rid of players. So yeah, it's 2-to-1 there, but it has disintegrated the front wall. So in reality, you now have 3 green players that are ineffective. You have a hooker who's not looking for the ball, or sorry, who's not doing anything, he's looking for the ball. I think that's something else, is just from an attack perspective. I think more hookers need to be worrying about getting a bit of an impact first before they get the ball back. In the old days, was trying to get the ball secure before you start driving, but now I think it's about momentum because you have to use it. So I think it's more about making an impact first. So I think you have to really try and disintegrate that front wall and make it ineffective, and I think that's going to make your job a lot easier than defensively. Okay, let's look at this then in the second half, though. Ireland kind of tidy things up a little bit. Now, I know in every single Maul we can argue. This ended up being disallowed, but for different reasons. We can argue almost every single Maul in terms of the lifters. I think that's just the nature of the game, whether it's obstruction or not. But ultimately, you can see I really like Joe McCarthy as the front lifter, big 4. Now his feet positioning could be a little bit tidier, but his foot patterns and feet positioning here can be a little bit sharper. He's a little bit off balance, but when he gets to here, I like this head action. He's looking at the defense and he absorbs the hit much better. Personally, I think that's okay. I don't think that's obstruction, because I think the jumper is accessible at this point, at the point of the jumper landing. I think that's okay if you slow it down. Anyway, so I think the front wall do a better job staying together. So they absorb the hit. As they roll around the corner or get around the corner, you can see where Ireland put some extra weight. They've got head on the outside there of the back lifter, and they've got Another other prop there also into that split. Sorry, number 17. He's going to come into the space here as I play it on Lockman. And again, they've just got extra weight on the blind side, or excuse me, on the open side. And as they get around, now some will argue about this aspect and whatnot. I think once you've kind of gotten go for it, they've kind of done the hard job. They probably should have scored here because they've got 4 here, and they probably, if they just stayed a little bit tighter and together, um, I reckon they probably would have scored. And you can even argue, like even as Ryan breaks off there, that if he doesn't kind of keep going, it's probably going to be a try. But look, it was disallowed. But I think I'm more interested in the first part of it and how to get around the corner, because once you get around the corner, I'm going to come back to that aspect later on. Um, I do think there's a lot of good in what they did there to kind of get themselves in that position. Okay, so we could then look at some of the defensive aspects. As I say, I wanted to look at the red zone, but mostly, but I just wanted to just throw a clip at you, which is a little bit different, and it's France here, and it's just how they regenerate. I think just generally with the Maul, whilst we're talking about the new Maul, I think there's potentially opportunities to break this, let's say, the attack up a bit, and it might actually get teams turnovers. They might lose 10 meters, and it doesn't happen here, but like this sort of scenario where it does break off a bit, it might lead in turnovers, whether it be you're able to hold them all up, or someone breaks off and you're able to turn them over. So I actually think if you compete and then you're regenerating, I think teams might come up with good teams might come up with a way to try and even with the new law focus, you still turn teams over. If you can kind of break up that Maul a bit, you might lose a few yards, but then you can, once it kind of gets a bit, if it gets too fast almost, you can actually break it up a bit and take out 1 or 2 guys, and yeah, you might lose 5 to 10 meters, but ultimately you might get scenarios like this where someone breaks off and you might get them. So um yeah, so I'm not going to do that again. Just want that was from one of my Patreon clips I did a while back, but I spent a bit of time on that one. But I just wanted to kind of just make that point about opportunities. Okay, you've probably seen this try, and I'll play it and then I'll kind of talk about it. So it's done the rounds. It's you've probably seen it from 2 weeks ago on the NPC. Okay, from a creativity perspective, I love it. Right, from yeah, and from a law perspective and allowing it, I'm inclined to say try. I've had a few people kind of say no try because you can't dummy from a Maul, and I'm saying what Maul, right? Um, I don't think the Maul has really formed that. Now it's probably obstruction as well with lifters on this one, but anyway, I'm not talking about that one. I'm not talking about that aspect. Like if that was open play, you'd probably have a few seconds. You'd have a few seconds before the ref says Maul. So when he catches it and he's in contact, you probably have a second or two before the ref says Maul. So that's what I'm saying. I'm sticking to that. I love the creativity on it, but if we look at how teams kind of set up, so this is kind of what North Harbour did on attack, roughly. And I think what we have to consider then, I've just kind of numbered them. It's not their number, the back of their jerseys. It's just I've labeled and numbered the Reds 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if they're going for a flat wall of 4, the forward who's the channel defender. So you've got a forward in the channel, you've a tail gunner, and then you've 2 backs, one behind the channel forward, and then one middle of the goal line. So what they've probably are aware of is that the defense, what are they going to do with the 5 and the 6 here? Is the 5 going to join on the 4 so they can't get around the corner, or is he going to come in behind and try and drive in the angle? And I think so. It's really those 2 guys that they're looking to target with that play, and it'll be a similar sort of option in the middle front as well. Now it's a little bit different, like previously I showed the Irish clip and how teams kind of got around the corner. When you're in the middle back to the back, that's easy. I wouldn't say it's easier, but it lends itself. It's easier because of where the numbers are coming from. But I think that's what's really smart about this one, is that it really challenges the 5 and the 6 to if you just watch them and where they go. So,
Tell you what, you take a brief, all right.
bear with me here in a second. So, what we're doing is we're looking at these last two defenders and the challenge that they are under now. So they hit with a flat wall of 4. This guy's ready to hit, depending on what the picture he sees here. And so these guys then they don't necessarily hit. It looks like he was going to go on the outside, and they weren't going to have anyone in behind. Um, and with that little dummy transfer from a Maul that wasn't a Maul yet, they then overwork the negative from negative to the next threat on the blind side. Um, so I think it's really smart, and I think that's where we can see teams that are really going to get caught against good mauls. It then lends itself to um, more opportunities potentially. And I think one team that I thought did this quite well were the Hurricanes. So during the super season. And you absolutely cannot cover anywhere. And I think if a team does this to you, it's almost hats off because I don't think you can really defend it. I think it's very, very difficult to defend it. Now, the one thing I would say about the Reds is that if you look at their 16, he's their front man. Like he works really hard to go far side. So this guy here, he works really hard to go far side, which I think just from what I reckon is the Hurricanes probably spotted that in terms of because this was I don't know what round number it was, but they were a number of rounds into it. So I think it's really smart from an analysis perspective. So they've done it open, and then they worked an inside ball, which look, I think that's now not impossible to defend. I think any sort of those options, and they did a few of them, and they scored off them. So, um, yeah, I think it's no wonder like they spent a lot of time doing red zone stuff. So it's no wonder that they scored a lot of tries here. So I think that's where you can really catch teams then as well from a red zone perspective, because if like France, if you have to commit, like if you look at how many numbers are committed, so you can see from the back here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, this guy's gonna overrun 6. He's not needed. Actually, he'll be on the open side too, 7. And then you have 6 who has to defend the blind side around 6. And again, from a numbers perspective, there's only so much, there's only so many defenders you can kind of cover in that close to the line. An athletic guy like that, there's no stopping him. So a couple more clips, and then I'm going to stop the recording, and we'll open it up. So, there's still a few trends though that I think we'll see, and I think one is the All Blacks here. This is the last weekend. I've got a couple of clips in this game actually. This is quite good from a Maul perspective, I think. So let's play it, and then I'll come back to it. So ultimately, they'll get over for a try. And what I like about it is that from a setup, so to go 3 in front wall, 3 in behind, but the black 3, kind of like a number 8 almost hitting as a 4, and then like a lot of teams go this sort of setup they'll kind of go, because the Stormers kind of hit. So if you look at how many men the Stormers commit, so they have channel forward who comes in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And the hooker's just assessing the tail gunner, or last man even, sorry. So they commit hard, and they're trying to prevent them getting around the corner here. They kind of lose the height battle a bit. This guy wins the height, and does a really good job on that. But then they'll pivot and use this guy here to roll, which is interesting. So they'll use him. They feel the weight is gone that side. Now 3 will just turn, and they'll use him to act as an axis, and to kind of go forward, and ultimately they kind of just get around the corner and get over for a nice try. So I think that is still that's been around. I think that's very much going to be in play. The other thing on the attack side, I'll play this. This is an interesting one. If we look at the All Blacks defense, so on both sides they get caught with ineffective players? Are they driving forward or are they driving from the side? And then they're able to kind of go and they get over. Is there any obstruction? More than likely, there probably is in most small tries. So let's look at this bit here. First thing that's kind of interesting, if we look out for, is when the Stormers get a bit of go forward, check out the open side defenders of New Zealand. So they have 3 defenders that actually overcommit here. Not overcommit, they've worked, but now they're going to be ineffective, and so they'll have to rejoin. And the speed of rejoining, I think, is absolutely critical. Now, as you're rejoining, though, you now have 3 more players that are ineffective. And that's what this guy starts to do really well. They start looking to the touch judge saying, come on, he's from the side, he's from the side, he's from the side. And so then they'll have to regenerate, or else it's going to be a penalty. It is trying to tidy it up, but there's more decisions to make. And there's always going to be loads of decisions to make, but there's newer decisions to make. And then we could argue, is there an element of obstruction there? But once teams are under pressure, then there's going to be opportunities to go. But if you stay together, you can kind of ride those waves of teams come from the side. And then, of course, how we look at our weight distribution. Now, granted, there's yellow cards here with this, so. But what I really like about this is, I think even if there was an extra forward there, I think this would be under pressure. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So, sorry, I must have. Okay, so we've got a channel defender. They're on a yellow card. So let's just say that's a forward, and there's a 9 here, okay, or a back. So because of the extra weight they put, and I'll show the weight now in a second, they're able to get through that side. But I mean, even if there's an extra forward there, I suspect that they might have been under pressure anyway. And I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so we jump. And it's this guy in particular that we're looking at. So they're going to put massive heat through this side in here. And you can see the impact that they're looking to make. So this guy is trying to win the headspace, but the weight makes it very difficult to negate it. And they work, and they work, and they get over. So I really like that in terms of the weight positioning. Again, that hasn't changed a huge amount, but I think that's just where teams are going to find it very tricky to defend because of the laws and whatnot. And I think if you can kind of stay together, think about your weight and punch through, I think you can be very effective. Now, I think show this one, but I think it's a good one to kind of come back to say it's not all is lost. And I showed this already, so I think it's kind of a useful one just to look at. Or sorry, I showed these 2 teams already. So I do think you can, as I said, you can defend the Maul, but I do think it can leave you exposed if you put more numbers in. Now, not everyone's going to put six defenders in, or a front wall or a front line of 6. But, and I think as well, you can see that they're really working hard to stay connected like a scrum. So it's a similar sort of shape you would have seen beforehand with 5 or 4. But it is going to leave you exposed potentially. And I think that's just the other thing to bear in mind. But this close to the red zone, you can get, you can still put teams like this under pressure if they don't have a set play off this, which it looks like there's an option, but it looks like a bit broken. But they obviously learned their lesson from when Roigard gets over later on. So I do think there's a bit in that. One of the things that I do think is an option when I get into the working doc from a Maul perspective and the weight distribution from a defense perspective, I think that will, give a few ideas as well. So I'm going to get into that now, and I'll just stop sharing and stop. Just make sure then there's no one else. Yeah, no one else. Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm going to keep the recording going, which you'll all get the recording. But as I say, I'll be editing it. Excuse me. Okay, so anyway, if anyone wants to ask any questions, feel free to just jump in now at this point, because none of this will be going, I would say, into the recording. If you've gotten this far, thank you very much for watching. If you'd like to join me on my next webinar, let me know. If you have any questions or comments or observations on this, please feel free to drop me a line, peter@lineoutlab.com, or comment on the video. Often email is best, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I plan to do a lot more YouTube stuff coming up and a lot more webinars as well. So yeah, thanks for watching.